My name is Robert, and this is my story. A story I carry like a weight on my shoulders, like a stone in my chest, like a knot in my throat that never fully unties. I need to tell this now, before it's too late, to serve as an example, a warning, a lesson for other fathers who still have time. I grew up in an era when men didn't show emotion. My father, James, had fought in the Second World War and returned to the United Kingdom transformed, hardened, silent. He raised me under the rigid belief that affection was a sign of weakness, that a real man didn't cry, didn't hug, didn't talk about what he felt. I remember it to this day. I must have been 6 or 7 when I fell off a fence and hurt my knee. It was bleeding, it hurt, I wanted to cry. My father pulled me by the arm and said, "Get up, men don't cry, swallow that cry and move on." I swallowed, and I kept swallowing for the rest of my life. For me, love was always synonymous with work. Providing was loving, ensuring comfort was loving, paying for private school, buying good clothes, providing financial security, that was real love. Words were dispensable, unnecessary, almost embarrassing. I thought my son would know I loved him simply because I worked so hard for him. On June 23, 1976, my son Michael was born. When the nurse placed that baby in my arms, something inside me broke. A wave of love so strong that I thought my chest would explode. I wanted to say everything at that moment. That I already loved him more than anything in the world, that I would give my life for him without a second thought, that this boy was the reason for everything. But what came out of my mouth was just, "He has my nose. He'll be strong." I handed the baby to Sylvia, my wife, and there began the construction of an invisible wall between my son and me, a wall made of silences. I worked as a civil engineer in London throughout my adult life. I sometimes worked 70, 80 hours a week. Michael grew up having everything. He studied at St. Edward's Academy, had private English lessons, practiced swimming at the club, got a new computer when he asked for one. On his high school graduation day, I felt immense pride. I wanted to hug him in front of everyone, to say that he was my greatest pride. But I limited myself to shaking his hand firmly and saying, "Good job, now real life begins." He smiled, but I saw something dim in his eyes. When Michael was 12, he joined the school basketball team. I never missed one of his practices, but on the way home, all that was between us was the sound of the radio or heavy silence. One day, he turned off the radio and asked me directly, "Dad, are you proud of me?" I felt my throat close up. Pride overflowed within me. I wanted to shout yes, that he was my greatest source of joy. But what came out was, "You're doing well, but practice your shot more." He nodded and never brought up the subject again. At 16, Michael had his first serious heartbreak. He stayed locked in his room, crying all afternoon. I stood on the stairs, wanting to go up, hug my son, tell him everything would pass, that he was valuable and loved. But my father's voice echoed in my head, "He needs to learn on his own, he can't be weak." I went back down to the living room. Sylvia went up in my place. Later she came down and said with that look I knew well, "He needed you, Robert. Not advice. You." I replied, "He's strong. He'll get over it." She shook her head and whispered, "Being strong isn't the same as feeling loved." I didn't understand then. It took me decades to understand. At 23, Michael graduated in business administration and got his first job at a multinational company. He called, excited, talking about his salary, benefits, and prospects. I gave him practical advice on how to invest, on private pensions, on saving money. What I really wanted to say was, "Son, I'm so proud my chest aches. You're everything to me." But the words didn't come out. They remained trapped, as they always had. At 28, Michael married Pauline, an intelligent and dedicated young woman he met in college. At the wedding rehearsal dinner, my son gave an emotional speech thanking Sylvia and me. He said that I taught him discipline, responsibility, work ethic, respect. Everyone applauded, but there wasn't a word about affection, about closeness, about love. It was at that moment, sitting at that table full of people, that I realized my son saw me as an example of effort, not affection. That same night I almost knocked on his bedroom door to finally say everything I felt. But I backed down. I thought it would seem too sentimental, out of place, strange. 2 years after the wedding, Michael received an irresistible offer to take over as regional director for a company in Toronto, Canada. Excellent salary, a unique opportunity for international growth. When he told me, I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet, but what I said was, "Great opportunity. You have to go." He seemed surprised, almost disappointed by my reaction. I think he expected me to ask him to stay, to say I would miss him. But I didn't say any of that. Michael moved to Canada in March 2012. The farewell at Heathrow Airport was quick, formal, distant. I gave him a handshake to my own son who was going to live on the other side of the world. Sylvia cried, hugged him, said she loved him. I stood there, hands in my pockets, waving as he passed through the boarding gate. When I returned home, I sat on the sofa and realized I had let my son leave without saying I loved him, without a real hug, without anything. In the first few months, Michael called every week. The conversations were always the same. He talked about work, about the cold Toronto weather, about the challenges of adapting. I responded with practical questions, professional advice, guidance on investments. Sylvia, by my side, pleaded with her eyes for me to ask if he was truly well, if he was happy, if he missed home. But I didn't ask. I thought these things were obvious, that they didn't need to be said. Over time, the calls started to space out. Once a week turned into once every 2 weeks, then once a month. When he called, Michael spoke less and less. I noticed, but I didn't know how to break that silence that grew between us like an abyss. One day, Sylvia took the phone from my hands and said, "Robert, you need to tell your son that you miss him, that you love him, that he's missed in your life." I replied, "He knows that, Sylvia. There's no need to keep repeating these things." She looked at me with a sadness I'll never forget and said, "One day you'll understand that people need to hear. They need to be sure." In 2015, Michael met Jennifer, a Canadian who worked at the same company. When he told me over the phone that they were dating seriously, I congratulated him and asked about her family, about her professional stability. What I really wanted to ask was, "Are you happy, son? Does she treat you well? Are you being loved as you deserve?" But those questions remained stuck in my throat. In 2017, Michael married Jennifer in a small ceremony in Toronto. Sylvia and I went, of course. It was the first time I had seen my son in 5 years. He was different, more mature, more distant, more Canadian than British. On the wedding day, there was a moment when we were alone in the garden of the reception venue. He looked at me and said, "Dad, I wanted you to know that." He paused for a long time. My heart pounded. I knew it was my chance, my opportunity to finally say everything. But I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. He gave up, offered an awkward smile and said, "Nothing. Forget it. Thanks for coming." We went back to the party. That moment haunts me to this day. 2 years later, in 2019, Michael called me with news. He and Jennifer had decided to apply for Canadian citizenship and stay permanently in Canada. They were going to buy a house in Vancouver, planning to have children, to build their lives there. When he said that, I felt as if a piece of me had been torn out. My son wasn't coming back. Never. He had chosen another country, another life, another future far from me. And I couldn't blame him. I tried to keep my voice firm and replied, If that's what you want, son, I support it." He was silent on the other end of the line, a heavy silence, filled with expectation. I knew he wanted to hear something else. He wanted me to ask him not to go, to say I would miss him, that he was too important to be so far away. But I couldn't. The words wouldn't come out. Michael took a deep breath and said, "All right, Dad. Thanks. Take care." And he hung up. The calls almost completely stopped after that. He sent short messages on birthdays, at Christmas, on Father's Day. Generic, polite, empty messages. When I tried to call, he didn't answer. When he did, he said he was busy, that he'd call back later. But he never called. In March 2021, Sylvia became very ill. She spent months in treatment, battling a delicate health condition. Michael knew, but he didn't come to visit. He said work didn't allow it, that the pandemic complicated travel, that he would send money to help with treatments. Money. As if money could solve it. Sylvia, even weak, told me, "Robert, you need to call Michael and ask him to come, not as an obligation, as a father who misses his son." I called. But what came out of my mouth was, "Michael, your mother is doing well, but it would be good for you to say hello to her when you can." He said yes, he would call. He didn't. Sylvia recovered, thank God, but something in her changed. She started looking at me differently, with pity, with disappointment. One day, sitting on the porch at home, she said, "You lost your son, Robert, and you didn't even notice when it happened." I tried to argue, to say no, that Michael was just busy, that his life was in Canada now. But she shook her head and added, "He didn't move away from the United Kingdom. He moved away from you." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I spent sleepless nights replaying every moment, every conversation, every opportunity I let slip away. I began to notice the pattern. I always expected love to be unspoken, that actions would be enough, that effort would compensate for the absence of words. But it didn't compensate. Michael grew up never being sure he was loved. And when he had the chance to build his life far away, he chose to stay far away. From me. I tried to change. I tried to send different messages, more affectionate, more open. "Son, how are you? I miss you." But the replies were always short, formal. "I'm fine, Dad. Thanks." The distance between us was already solidified. The wall I started building when he was born was now insurmountable. In 2023, Michael and Jennifer had a son, a boy, my grandson. They sent a photo via WhatsApp. I looked at that child and felt a tightening in my chest. I called immediately. Michael answered, but the conversation was brief, formal. I said congratulations, asked how Jennifer was, if they needed anything. He thanked me and said everything was fine. As I was about to hang up, I gathered my courage and said, "Michael, He waited. I continued. "I wanted to say that I'm very happy for you. You're going to be a great father." He only replied, "Thanks, Dad. I have to go. We'll talk." And he hung up. What I wanted to say was, "Son, I love you. I always loved you. I miss you every day. Forgive the father I was. Forgive my silence. Forgive my inability to say what I felt." But those words remained trapped inside me. Today, at 76, I wake up every morning with the weight of regret. I imagine conversations I never had, hugs I never gave, words I never spoke. I look at old photos of Michael as a child and wonder, how did I let this happen? I had 47 years with my son living near me, 47 years of opportunities, before bed, at breakfast, on holiday trips, on birthdays, on lazy Sundays. Thousands of moments when I could have said 3 simple words, "I love you," and I didn't. Now I understand what Sylvia always tried to make me see. Words don't replace actions, but they complete them. Without words, love can seem like absence. It can seem like indifference. It can leave marks of doubt that never fully heal. I discovered too late that fear imprisoned me, fear of seeming weak, fear of being vulnerable, fear of breaking with the rigid emotional upbringing I received from my father. I repeated the same pattern with Michael that I suffered. I perpetuated the cycle, and my son, with all wisdom, decided to break that cycle. He says, "I love you" to his son every day. I know because Jennifer posts it on social media. I see my grandson growing up surrounded by verbalized affection, constant hugs, the certainty of love. Michael became the father I never managed to be, and I am proud of him for that. But I am also broken inside because I know it was I who pushed him away. It wasn't Canada. It wasn't the distance. It was me, with my silence. Today my greatest wealth is not the properties I accumulated, nor the investments I made. It is the pain I carry, and I decided to transform that pain into a warning. I tell my story to anyone who will listen, to fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, grandchildren, to everyone who still has time. I look at these hands, still firm but heavy with regret, and I conclude, no professional achievement, no financial wealth replaces 3 words spoken at the right time. I cannot rewrite my past, but I can use my story as a lesson for other people's present. Love needs to be spoken. It needs to be heard. It cannot just be implied. Courage is not silencing feelings. Courage is expressing them, even with fear, even with shame, even breaking old patterns. If you are reading this, if you have someone you love and haven't said it yet, don't wait. Don't make the mistake I made. Don't let time steal your chance. Don't wake up one of these mornings years from now, conversing with regrets, wishing you could go back. Say it now. Say it today. Say it always. Because I would trade everything, absolutely everything I achieved, for 5 minutes beside my son, to look into his eyes and say clearly, "Michael, I always loved you. You were always my greatest pride, and I am so sorry for never having said it when you needed to hear it most."